This stinks. No.
Yes, we should just say welcome back to CBR, or Cartridge-Based Radio.
Yes.
I'm Donald. I'm rude.
No.
I was going to introduce us, but you're like, yeah, let's get to the show.
No, I suppose it would probably be good for our listeners to know who we are.
You got to get that brand in.
Yeah. I'm Brad, and
I'm Donald.
We are going to be talking Final Fight this week. But before we jump into that, an important historical event happened over the weekend. You may have seen it on the web if you go to the right kind of websites, but for the first time in Monster Jam history, a driver did a front flip.
It was glorious. A little tear rolled down my cheek as I watched it happen.
Yeah, I looked up at the American flag and thought, what an awesome country we live in.
Did an eagle land on it and just look at you and say, freedom, and then just crack a Budweiser?
That is exactly what happened. But I think my favorite thing about this whole story is there must be a Monster Jam historian. For them to know that this was the first front flip in Monster Jam history, somebody's got to be keeping track of these things.
And he was sitting in an office just watching on a little monitor because he's got to keep track of all these stats. And then it happened, and he just lost it. Like, people didn't know what was happening. He's just running around the office. He's like, ah!
Get me on the phone to whatever small town the event's happening, and I got to let them know they need to make an announcement. This is history.
Monster Jam would like to announce that was the first forward flip ever. The crowd was already going nuts, just kind of goes a little more nuts. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess.
I saw it on the web, and I got excited because that was amazing.
I knew it was coming. The video I saw it in already had it in the description, so I knew it was coming, and it was still great.
I saw it in GIF format, and the title of the post was, "You Won't Believe This." So I was completely surprised when I saw it happen.
You were completely surprised that no one got harmed. Because when you see a Monster Jam highlight with "You won't believe this happened," the first thing you think is, oh, I absolutely believe what I'm about to see.
Yes, that tire did land in the sixth row. Who would have guessed?
I just wanted to bring that up because we're not just video game guys. We are well-rounded, cultured people who...
Monster Jam, pro wrestling...
Fast and the Furious movies,
Video games... Anything starring Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, really.
Just our cultural point of reference.
You got pre-Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson and post-Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. Everything before that was just Stone Cold Steve Austin, and that was not a good time for anybody. Then The Rock saved us.
Yeah, everybody remembers the late 90s when everyone hated Stone Cold? That doesn't sound right.
No, everyone liked him, and then there was some moment where something flipped, and people started hating Stone Cold more than Goldberg. And I didn't know what was going on anymore, and I thought maybe it was time to leave pro wrestling. He beats up his wife once, and everyone's like, "You're a bad man, Stone Cold Steve Austin."
It's funny how that works.
It's probably because when you beat up your wife, you're a bad man, Stone Cold Steve Austin. Speaking of muscly, overroided gentlemen of stature, Final Fight. Mayor Mike Haggar.
Yes, he gets elected running on a tough-on-crime platform in Metro City, which has just been plagued by crime. It's basically run by the Mad Gear Gang, which is an organized street gang. I guess.
So, what city is this city analoging? So, it's a little bit like San Francisco, some New York. It's a very confusing mash.
It steals landmarks from a bunch of different cities. I think basically you can think of it as what Capcom thinks every American city is. Or was in 1988 or whatever.
I mean, we could complain that, yeah, it's kind of rough to play these days, but that formula has been perfected over the years. Going back was just, what I was more concerned about is the subway level.
Okay.
This is where things got real weird for me playing Final Fight again.
Okay.
You start the subway, you're riding on the train, not where you're in the station, and you walk up and there's two guys sitting in a seat.
Yeah.
Doing absolutely nothing. And they don't do anything until you punch them in the head. We've talked before that so far the only person that in a video game that wasn't a villain was Jill Valentine. And I was like, oh, here's our villain moment. I just walked up and punched some dude riding on the subway in the head. If someone has an iPhone, they're going to record that and it's going to go viral. Like, look at this crazy man on the subway wearing no shirt and like half a pair of suspenders.
Yeah, just one of the two.
Just beating up somebody on a subway for no reason.
That video would go viral even if it was just a random guy. This is the mayor. This is the mayor of the city, gets on the subway and just starts wailing on people.
And then you get to the front of the subway car and there's no one driving it. It's just, it kind of ends at the front of the subway car. And what is this city?
It's a city that's been taken over by crime, apparently. There is such random attacks on people throughout the entire game that you can really just draw one of two conclusions. One, the mayor just has no idea what he's doing at all, and he's just attacking everything he sees. He's so enraged by the capture of his daughter or whatever, but, just blind fury attacking everything he runs into. The other conclusion that you can draw is that literally everyone in Metro City is a criminal. Like, it's just a city where criminals live and no one else. And, to take the fight on crime in a literal sense, you're just going to have to beat up every single person you see because they're all criminals.
Yeah, it's so bizarre. I mean, obviously he ran on a tough on crime campaign, which everyone's going to get behind if they live in the city. The beginning of that game, you don't get attacked right away. You just walk up to someone and punch them, and that's how it starts. It doesn't start with you being attacked. It doesn't really start with she's been kidnapped. They just have this picture like, help, Dad, I'm captured. And he's like, well, I gotta go I'm just gonna go down to the street and punch the first person I see, and that will lead me to her.
Normally the way it works in politics is you make a bunch of promises and, some of them you're sincere about and some of them you're maybe pandering, but you say some things that make people want to vote for you, and then they go out and they vote for you. And that's usually the way it works. And it doesn't seem like Haggar should have gotten elected in the first place. If the city is being run by criminals, you would expect that maybe they'd bring in their own kind of guy who has a clean record, but they can back, financially, have some influence over. They shouldn't need to resort to kidnapping the mayor's children because they should already be running things. And especially if every single citizen in the city is a criminal, which it appears to be that way, they probably wouldn't vote for a tough-on-crime mayor.
To be fair, if there are criminals with records, they can't vote. So there literally could just be one person in that city who voted for Haggar and he won.
Yeah, it might have been Haggar himself.
Or that confused-looking Cody he's like, hey, Cody, we're going to go beat up people in the street. And Cody's like, I'm not the mayor. I'll get arrested for that. And he's like, wuss.
It's kind of weird because there's three of them. There's Haggar, who's the mayor, and his daughter's been kidnapped. There's Cody, who's kind of the boyfriend of the kidnapped daughter, but maybe it's more just that he likes her. I don't know if they're official. And then there's Guy, who's just appropriately just some guy who happens to be a ninja, and he also wants to go beat up criminals.
Let me tell you about Guy. Guy has watched too many videos of Ken from Street Fighter 2 on YouTube, and that's why he dresses like that and thinks he's a ninja. And she's probably totally dating Ken because his dad has a dealership.
I think there's some chronology problems with that timeline, but...
No, Guy is in Street Fighter. So they, at some point, those two cross, and Ken and Guy are in the same place at the same time.
That is an excellent point. What I find to be really funny is if you think about, the way today's political climate is and how partisan people are, and they'll defend their party's candidates no matter what. Like, as the mayor's running around beating people up at random and punching cars at one point, like half the voters in the city would probably find ways to justify this. They'd be like, oh, it's fine.
Yeah, he was tough on crime. He stopped that carjacking by pulling the engine out of it. That old man in a wheelchair that couldn't get up and defend himself tripped and fell through that glass window. I mean, I would have trouble defending Mike Haggar's actions, but I'm sure someone could justify everything he did.
Yeah, I mean, maybe the hardest thing to justify is going to be the fact that Haggar eats food out of the garbage can. Like, you're walking along and you see a garbage can and you beat it up because of course you do. And there's a hamburger inside, and Haggar just pops that down like it's the greatest thing he's ever found.
Maybe we're looking at this all wrong. Imagine this is an Escape from New York situation, where everyone's a criminal on the inside, and he just calls himself mayor. We never have any proof him, Guy, and Cody are good guys. They could be a gang called the Mayors, for all we know.
Wow, Mad Gear versus the Mayors. That is entirely possible. But I prefer to think that this takes place in the real world where people voted for this madman to be mayor of the city. And, the first time something goes wrong, he just goes wandering through the city, throttling everything he sees. There's no plan. I mean, he beats people up. He jumps on the subway, beats up people on the subway. At one point, he beats up a car for no reason. He just sees a car, and there's a pipe nearby, and he's like, well, this solves itself. He enters a wrestling match at one point. Like, he just jumps into a pro wrestling match. And I kind of wonder if the samurai knew that it was going to be a real fight. Like, this is in a wrestling ring with a crowd. You're probably, I think the guy's named like Sodom or something. And he's probably expecting to be like in a choreographed wrestling match. And then this crazy mayor just comes in and smashes the heck out of him and pummels him for a while.
He's hitting him with his foam rubber swords and getting his face beat in. And, under his mask, he's like, oh, man, be cool. Come on, be cool. What are you doing? And then he just murders him in the ring. And the crowd's going wild. And I guess he'd have to grab the mic and be like, that man was a criminal. Peace out.
Big props to the samurai for not breaking kayfabe in the middle of the match and, calling out to the crowd and being like, hey, he's really hitting me.
I'm being murdered. Help me. Yeah! Someone would yell something homophobic at him and the samurai would feel really sad because it's a pro wrestling event and that's what happens there.
At one point in the middle of this rampage, the mayor storms through a fancy restaurant, beats up everybody, ends up outside in kind of the nice part of town, and fights a police officer. And I think we're supposed to believe that this is a corrupt one, bought out by the gangs or whatever. He's fat, so that equals bad cop.
He's probably like a month away from retirement, and he's finally going to get to just move out to the country with his grandchildren. He survived the city for, let's say 35 years. And he hears this report of a crazy man tearing apart a fancy restaurant. So he goes and reports, and Haggar just bursts through the wall and starts pummeling him. He doesn't fight back because you really can't fight it back against Haggar. And as he's laying there on the ground bleeding to death, he's holding the picture of his grandchildren, thinking of what could been. And then Haggar curb stomps him and screams, "My daughter," and just runs down the street.
At one point the cop does try to shoot Haggar. That's one of his attacks, is he will shoot at you. And I'm just thinking, like, if that worked, and the cops ended up gunning down the mayor in the middle of the street, like, could you imagine the news the next day? That would be a really big deal, right? Like, mayor gunned down by cops.
That'd be one of those things where you're watching your favorite TV show, and they cut in with the big, like, red high alert banner, and the mayor has just been gunned down by a cop after some unknown assailant ripped apart this restaurant. When I was younger, this was probably like the ultimate teenage power fantasy kind of thing. You're playing the big muscly guy, beating up all the bullies. But now that I'm a responsible adult who votes, I cannot figure out what is going on in Final Fight. And is this the final fight? He's like, "Cody, this is the last time we're going to go do this, but we're going to do it." And Guy's like, "Yo, I'll come along." And Haggar's like, "Shut up, Guy. No one asked you. Come on, Cody." Cody's like, "I'm your accountant, Mr. Haggar."
Guy doesn't even get into the Super Nintendo version. They're just like, people care so little about Guy that we're not even going to include him in this game.
Yeah, poor Guy.
Then later on, when Capcom decided that they wanted more money, they re-released Final Fight with Guy instead of Cody. They didn't add all three characters. They just swapped out Cody for Guy.
Just Final Fight with a little banner below it that says, "With Guy."
But not Cody. They should really just say, like, what's the point? You're going to pick Haggar anyway because he rules.
I'd like to imagine after Haggar was probably taken out of office in handcuffs after beating up half a police force to stop himself from being arrested for the many, 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 many crimes he committed, the city basically just turned into Streets of Rage for the Sega Genesis.
Playing Final Fight again and playing all the way through it for the first time in a long time, I started to feel really embarrassed for Streets of Rage because it just so badly wants to be Final Fight. It stole just about everything from that game that it could.
Now, I'd say that Streets of Rage has a much better musical soundtrack.
Absolutely. I will absolutely say that Streets of Rage has one of my favorite soundtracks, especially the first one. Second one, good soundtrack. Much better graphics on the first one, but the soundtrack on the first one is just superb. And Final Fight soundtrack is kind of, it's there.
Yeah.
It's not fantastic.
Now, the voice samples in Final Fight are amazing. Yeah. And also the names in Final Fight are a name. Like, at one point I was playing and I asked my wife, "How do you spell Doug?" And she said D-O-U-G. That's yeah. Doug. And I'm looking at the screen, it's just like D-U-G, like dug a hole. This is my son, Doug. Okay, D-O-U-G. No, D-U-G.
Well, you probably already beat up his brother, Dig.
Yeah, and his best friend, Spike, and his other best friend. I saw Brad in there.
Was it Brad or was it bread?
Oh, it was bread.
Yeah. Like bread the food or bread like you breed animals?
The food. I actually had a note around here to introduce you as Bread tonight, but I left the note in another room because I thought that'd be a pretty good Final Fight goof that nobody would get because no one's played that game in forever.
If you were to have done that, I would have been sure to have worn my fluorescent orange jacket with the radioactive symbol on the back and the green collar.
Those guys just might be workers who saw the fight going down. They're like, yo, we got to get over there and help those people being beat up by the mayor. We have to stop our jobs at the radioactive plant and go help. And why do you have sleeveless radioactive vests on? Like, I just want to protect the core right here where my heart is, but the arms, screw it. I'm getting some radioactive tans.
There are a lot of really questionable fashion choices in Final Fight. There's the guys with the fluorescent jackets with the radioactive symbols. There's the mayor with his half a suspender. There's...
It's like a bandolier suspender.
It holds up my pants, and it looks so cool. There's the girls with the short shorts, heels, and like handcuff belts. That is probably not the most practical street fighting outfit. They also wear, like, I don't know if it's supposed to be police hats or biker hats. They might be trying to disguise themselves not very effectively as policewomen.
I thought those hats looked like SS soldier hats.
There's a couple of other really... Almost all the bosses look like pro wrestlers.
There's the guy with knives who looks like Shay, who somehow defies gravity and flies through the air while pointed... with his head pointed down and knives in both. Yeah, it's like, you probably could have a job as, like, you know, an acrobat or something. Why are you a head knife stabber, dude?
That guy would be awesome at Benihana. Like, just, like, ordering your food, and all of a sudden the chef comes out and flies through the air like some kind of, like, stab-to-puss and chops up all your food while flying over the grill.
Yeah, they just, like, they throw the ingredients into the air over your head, and suddenly the chef is there, and it all perfectly lands on your plate, and you're like, this is a good place we went for our one night off for our date. Thanks, honey.
And then the America bursts through the door and beats everybody up.
That guy with the knives is a criminal, and just shoves his face on a grill, and everyone's like, oh, I don't want to be here anymore. And he's like, vote Haggar.
By the way, I beat up your car.
The BMW in the parking lot, I'm sorry. It's a Capcom game, and apparently they really hate cars.
That actually has one of the best... you were talking earlier about the voice samples in this game. One of the best ones is after you beat up the car, and the guy comes out and sees what you've done. And in the Super Nintendo version, he's just like, oh, my car. And like, in the arcade version, oh my god. But either way, it's just fantastic.
When I see come out of a restaurant and I see my car is crumpled, I'm like, oh, my car. I'd be like, oh, I need some information from you, Mike Haggar. And he's like, here's my
the mayor.
Here's my information, and he just punches you in the face and you die. And he's like, problem solved. That man was a criminal. He double parked.
Coming back to the fact that the mayor eats out of garbage cans, which is something that, you know, people have mocked before in this game and other also other beat 'em up games, is, you know, the break a garbage can, find food inside, why not eat it? But what I find to be the real question is, who threw out a perfectly good hamburger in the first place? Or
a whole rotisserie chicken. A pizza.
Yeah, perfectly good. You know, it's not like it's half eaten. This is a perfect turkey. Like a Thanksgiving turkey that's just in the garbage. And the only thing I can think of is that some guy in the Mad Gear gang is also aspiring to be a chef. And these are all his, like, it just isn't quite up to my standard. In the garbage you go.
Or he doesn't want the other people to know that he's an aspiring chef and he wants to get out of the gang. And when they walk by, he quickly throws the rotisserie chicken in an oil drum. And they're like, hey, what you doing over here, Doug? He's like, nothing, Spike. Smells like chicken over here. Were you cooking again? No, Spike. Then Haggar runs up and just punches them both as they're having a discussion about was he cooking or not.
Do you know which one of these oil drums has my diamond ring and samurai sword in it?
Someone left a pearl necklace in this oil drum for some reason. And then he sees the pearl necklace on the ground. He looks at it. And then he steals it. He just puts it in his pocket. He's like, well, I'm mayor. I deserve this, I suppose. I liberated it from this garbage can.
Yeah, I think somewhere I read that as soon as you put your garbage out to the curb, it is considered like the property of the city or something. Like, it was something they used in a criminal case once where the FBI pulled evidence out of a garbage can and the defendant was like, hey, that was my garbage. You didn't have a warrant to go through them. They're like, yeah, once it's in the garbage, it's my property. And if there was a whole hamburger in there, I would have eaten it too.
We found the bloody murder knife and this cold cut combo. Delicious.
The real irony is probably that those other Mad Gear members that the chef was afraid of would have really appreciated this food. And they would have been like, hey, that's great that you're doing this. And maybe we should open a restaurant instead of hang out on street corners and intimidate people.
Maybe the two guys on the subway were on their way to the bank to get a loan to open their restaurant because the gang had just let them out. But they're still wearing the gang, like, puffy Back to the Future vest. And Haggar's like, oh, criminal elements. And they're like, we could probably saute some mushrooms. And then he watches his friend's head get collapsed. And he's like, oh, no. Doug. Doug.
You made that great chicken. You had such potential.
And now his friend wanders the streets of Gear City, leaving food in garbage cans as a homage to Doug, who left this earth too early because an enraged mayor.
Maybe the crime in the city wouldn't be so bad if there were some jobs, but it seems like just about any job that you could get in the city, like nice restaurant, mayor comes in, trashes it. Warehouse for whatever, mayor comes in, trashes it. There's a factory. The factory doesn't seem like a great place to work. There are safety violations all over the place. It's mostly on fire. There's a conveyor belt over lava that doesn't look very sturdy. But it's probably the only place to get a job in town at this point, and the mayor trashes that. So, you want to do something about the crime in the city, mayor. First of all, take care of that factory because it's just a billion safety violations. And secondly, maybe get at the root cause and do something about the unemployment.
There's got to be something you can do about, working on the streets without going out and punching everybody. I have to believe.
It doesn't seem like there's a lot of things to do in the city other than crime. There's no jobs, there's no recreation. It's just like you can go mug people, or you can kind of hang out in an alley and just be assumed that you're a criminal and get beat up anyway. But, if you made the city a little less terrible, you'd probably see a reduction in crime that you wouldn't have to bloody your knuckles to achieve.
Maybe a nice park. Maybe attract some outside businesses to come in to set up some... Everyone loves a froyo stand. You set up a froyo stand, no one's going to fight outside of it.
No.
So, froyo. He should have brought froyo.
Start some tax incentives, get some businesses going downtown, give people things to do in the city. It seems like maybe all the non-criminals might have moved to the suburbs. It was kind of, this game came out in the late 80s. That was the thing that was happening a lot, is people were leaving the cities for small towns outside the cities. And Metro City looks like everybody moved out, and what's left behind is just misery and crime.
And they elected the biggest criminal of all.
Yes.
So they just make bad decisions all the way around, at all times. Maybe Haggar was a criminal, and they did elect him because he was part of them, and then he started beating them up because he's like, well, I'm the mayor now, so I should beat these guys up.
According to the biographies, Haggar is an ex-street fighter, so his job previously, his previous experience, was beating the crap out of people for money. That was his career until he became a mayor.
Did he retire from, like, Street Fighter before Street Fighter 2 started?
I guess. I mean, clearly he hasn't really retired from punching people. He's all about that lifestyle.
So here's my actual true question. Did he win the Street Fighter tournament and M. Bison's like, okay, you can have the world? And he said, no, I just want to be mayor of Gear City. And Bison shrugged his shoulders like, okay, you're the mayor of Gear City, not the world. He's like, awesome.
I'm going to beat up so many people now.
They can't arrest me when I'm a mayor. And Bison's like, actually, Mike, you know what? Never mind. No, they can't arrest you for beating up people as the mayor. He just went along his jolly way.
They can't arrest you because they literally can't arrest you because you keep pummeling them.
It's like, put out your hands. He's like, oh, you want a spinning hurricane punch? And just knock 6 cops down. I'm like, just let him do what he wants. He's literally beating that man to death in front of us. He's the mayor. What are you going to do?
The final boss in this game, we kind of alluded to it, but you know, for people who haven't played the game or maybe didn't get that far, for the final stage of the game, you go into this fancy high-rise and you fight your way through the building and you end up in this office fighting not the guy from the opening screen that you see, you know, on the intro, and he's the boss of the first level and you don't see him again, but just like this old guy in a tuxedo who's in a wheelchair, and you beat the daylights out of him and pick him up out of his wheelchair and throw him off of a building. And that's how the game ends.
There's so many problems with this whole scenario. A, picking up someone who can't defend themselves. B, throwing them out a window. And C, calling that a victory. Like, yeah. Did you beat the cripples, Mr. Haggar? What were you doing?
He was the head of the evil corporation that was behind all the crime.
Allegedly.
Yeah. Well, you know, only in the 1980s would it be remotely plausible that a huge corporation is also running all the crime in the city. You know, oh yeah, we run a bank and a street gang.
And how would your corporation prosper in this city where there's 0 jobs? So whatever you're producing doesn't actually get made because the criminals are always getting in your way.
Or the mayor smashing up your factory.
Yeah, or your restaurant. I want to understand Final Fight, but it is impossible to understand Final Fight. There's a man who sits on a ledge and waits till you're not looking, then just defies gravity and kicks you in the back of the head.
Well, Donald, you have to understand, it was the 1980s.
I was alive in the 80s, and no one sat on a ledge and then defied gravity and kicked me in the head.
You were not going to the right kinds of parties.
I mean, was that like an East Coast thing?
Yeah.
You're just walking down the street and someone's sitting on the subway thing and you look back and suddenly you get kicked in the head.
I mean, I was a kid, but yeah, that is exactly how I remember it. Is just, you know, crime gangs all over, and every so often you just go on a one-man spree against them, and that was your weekend.
Did they call themselves crime gangs?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes, they're like, we are a crime gang known as Mad Gear.
Did they get on the news and say, today a crime gang
kidnapped the mayor's daughter?
Went up against the police cop. Where was the FBI? The mayor's daughter gets kidnapped. There should have been bodyguards around her with guns. No one has guns in this city. It seems like they outlawed most of the guns, so the street gangs have katana blades, rain gutters, or rain rain down spouts. Or is it just a metal pipe? And
so many knives.
Yeah, and so many knives. Like the one guy who defies gravity who should work in at Benihana, when you punch him, a knife just falls out of him.
He's made of knives.
He's sentient knives.
Pretty much. There's a variation of the knife guy who wears all red, and he runs on the screen and he throws a Molotov cocktail and he runs off screen. And I think every single time that I've ever seen him, he's lit himself on fire. I don't think it's possible for that guy to not light himself on fire.
It's his first time in the crime gang with throwing the Molotov cocktails, and they're so mad because they have to keep getting a new Molotov cocktail guy because the guy's first time trying, he just lights himself on fire. I'm like, dang it, recruiting this position is so hard.
Yeah, I want to make it clear to our listeners that you should not join a crime gang and go around throwing Molotov cocktails everywhere. But if you're going to, don't throw it and then run in the same direction that you just threw it. Terrible idea.
Run in the opposite direction of a Molotov cocktail.
Yeah.
Whether you threw it or whether it was thrown at you.
Yeah,
don't run towards Molotov cocktails.
Always run away.
That's some quality CBR advice from us to you.
Yes.
I have ran towards 0 Molotov cocktails in my life.
I would say you've lived a pretty normal existence. I think 0 is probably the normal number for most people.
The problem with the Molotov cocktails that I see is Mike Haggar probably oils his body up before he goes out so he glistens as he beats people. If one of those suckers lands, he's in some trouble. Just the mayor died in a brilliant torch of coconut body oil and alcohol.
It really looked like whoever at Capcom was in charge of designing these characters, they're like, all right, our main character is the mayor of a city, former Street Fighter. What should he look like? And whoever designed this, like, what if Freddie Mercury from Queen was really, really jacked? Like, super jacked and wore one suspender.
I wish someone would go in and replace all of Haggar with some Freddie Mercury sound bits. That would make me so happy.
I want a final fight where all the characters have been replaced by members of Queen. And otherwise, it's the same game. But you're just the members of Queen, and it plays Don't Stop Me Now in the background. And all the voice clips are Freddie Mercury saying things.
All right, so let's go one deeper. We now have Freddie Mercury. Who is he fighting? What band replaces the crime gangs?
I probably would have just kept it with the crime gangs, but if we're going to change it up, then I don't know, somebody from the 70s, I guess.
Kiss?
That would probably make the most sense.
Now, would Bono be the guy in the wheelchair at the end?
I don't think Bono was in Kiss.
No, but I mean, you could have multiple bands, like the Radioactive guys, they're Kiss.
Yeah.
The guys with knives are, I don't know.
That would actually be like a pretty big reveal if you play through the game and like at the end of every stage you fight a member of Kiss. And then you get to the last stage, you're like, well, I've already fought all 4 members of Kiss. What's it going to be? And then it's like Bono, and it's like, you too actually controls all the crime in this city. You thought it was Kiss. You beat up all those innocent Kiss members.
And as he falls out of the building, you just hear him go, Joshua Tree.
I would play that game.
The end credits is the Princes of the Universe. So, final fight. Should we rate these games? Or I'd give it like 3 Mike Haggar mustaches out of 5.
Yeah, I might go 4. It's one of my favorite older games. I'm partial to beat 'em ups. And it's one of the better ones. I think when you play a beat 'em up, the good balance is kind of it's a little bit challenging, but it's also, you can just pummel a lot of people quickly, so that you're sitting there and you're like, man, look at just like how much violence I'm creating. So that's a good feeling. So it's got a nice balance of difficulty, but still letting you kick a lot of ass. Music's okay. I like the
It's got some cheap shots.
yeah, it definitely does. I like that the characters are fairly large, so that's cool. I have to admit that this game came out when I was like 11 or 12, and Poison might have been my first crush. I'm not somebody who's going to go around talking about like all the female game characters that I think are the hottest or anything, but yeah, I'm a little partial to Poison.
Did Poison come to Street Fighter?
Yes, Poison is in Ultra Street Fighter 4 and also in Street Fighter X Tekken.
Oh, Street Fighter X Tekken.
Yeah, or Tekken X Street Fighter. The one that actually got released.
It's Street Fighter. Yeah, the Tekken one didn't come out and will never come out. I could do a whole show on why I did not like Street Fighter Cross Tekken.
Well, none of those reasons better be Poison.
No, Poison's fine. My problem is the gem system in that game.
Yeah, that was pretty bad. Speaking of the other game that she's in, I'm not a huge Street Fighter 4 fan because of the Ultra combos, which seem like they reward you for getting beat up.
Yeah, they do. So what if we put Poison in Mike Haggar's role?
So you just run around as Poison beating up I would play... We wouldn't be able to do the show because I'd still be playing that game.
You'd just be sitting there with anime heart eyes saying, "Notice me, senpai."
Like I said, I don't like to be that guy who's like lusting over game characters. That's creepy. But I mean, she's got the red hair and the long legs and the short shorts, and yeah.
So, well, thank you for joining me for this talk on hard-hitting politics.
Yes.
I am Donald. That's Brad.
I'm Brad.
Oh, yeah, we both said it.
Yeah.
And
I'm just that important.
Yeah. You have the best waveforms, and you get your name said twice. Branding. All right, so we are Cartridge Based Radio, and we'll see you next week. Oh, and maybe rate us on iTunes.
Yes.
And go to the Facebook page.
Yes.
And tell one friend. Like, maybe not someone you like, just maybe someone you don't like. Like, listen to this podcast, and then they'll know, oh, that guy's my enemy.
No, definitely. If you're like a kid who's in high school, tell the girl that you like about this. Make her a mixtape of our podcast to show her how much you love her.
All the great moments we've had so far. Would that just be like a mix MP3 these days?
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, but... Yep, we are Cartridge Based Radio, and we will see you later.